My name is Sarah. I have been an occupational therapist since 2009, and I specialize in early intervention, and that is specifically working with children birth to 3 years of age. I am also an entrepreneur, so I started and I run my own private practice. And of course, it specializes in early intervention, and it's in Los Angeles, California, even though I actually don't live in LA anymore. I live in Colorado, so I run my business all completely remote. And I have two wonderful employees that work with me. I am also a mom to two little ones. I have an energetic and sassy 2-year-old daughter named Abigail, and I have an ever curious, always on the move 10-month-old son named Archie. And I have to say that becoming a mom has completely shifted my perspective as an occupational therapy practitioner. There's so many things that I do differently, think differently about since I have become a mom. And it's really kind of just given me a different lens of how I go about my therapy and my services and my intervention and everything like that. Just just to point you to the pictures on the screen, there's one picture. This was taken on Mother's Day. I really wanted to just have a nice picture with my two kids, and clearly you can see that that idea didn't quite work out as planned. And that's just kind of life with two little ones. And then the other picture, I was actually visiting my parents during Mother's Day. And so the other picture is my dad and my kids and I, and we were all playing and having the best time. And so that is Baba, as my kids call my dad. I am also a world traveler, and I've traveled all over the world, and I also like to do volunteer work. So I actually volunteer as an occupational therapist during some of my travels in countries that might have limited or no access to early intervention. I've been to Peru and Ecuador, Cambodia, and Honduras. I'm an avid scuba diver, I'm a craft beer enthusiast, and I'm also a podcast host. I host my own show, which is called OT for Life, and I also co host the Real OTs of Early Intervention and a brand new show that's actually going to be launching next month called the OTpreneur Podcast. So clearly, I love talking about occupational therapy and early intervention, hence, why I'm here today. So let's get in. Hopefully, it's switched. Let's get into what early intervention actually is. So, in a nutshell, early intervention is supports and services for young children and their families. And some children that might be eligible for early intervention include those who are at risk of experiencing a developmental delay. So these are children that might have been born prematurely, they might have been exposed to drugs or alcohol in utero, or maybe have been exposed to some sort of trauma within their lifetime. There's also children that can be eligible for early intervention who might have an established developmental delay or some sort of a diagnosis. Some of the diagnoses that I've seen throughout kind of my work as an OT would include autism, cerebral palsy, Down syndrome, cystic fibrosis, and some genetic syndromes. So the beautiful part about early intervention is that not only do we get to work with the kids, but we do get to work with the families as well. And it's something that makes early intervention a super unique practice area coming from a practitioner, where a lot of times when we're working with the clients, we're only working with the clients and that's it. And we really get to address the family system, the family dynamics as a whole. Services under early intervention can include occupational therapy, which I will get a little bit more into detail in just a minute, but also physical therapy, speech therapy, and it can also include developmental specialists, vision and hearing, social work, among many other services. So, generally, early intervention is for children that are birth to 3 years of age. But in some areas, it can actually go up to age 5. So, it really kind of depends on what area that you live in. And I also want to mention here that because early intervention services are provided by the state, they can vary depending on the region and depending on where you are. And in all of my talking with other occupational therapy practitioners all across the US and across the world, early intervention looks a little different depending on where you live. So if you are curious and you want to know more details about your specific area, you're going to want to do some research and contact your local early intervention um, program, because like I said, every place is going to be just a little bit different. Okay, so, oops, yeah, okay. So, early intervention is family centered, which I kind of just touched on. And this means that the families are actively involved in all parts of the process. It also means that the supports and services are individualized and basically prioritized to each family's needs and their strengths. The services are generally delivered within the child's natural environment, and so that typically means that they're occurring within the child's home, but it could also mean that we can see the children in some of the like community centers or going to the park, or I've had actually sessions in restaurants before, going to daycare, preschool programs, anything like that. Early intervention utilizes a strength based approach, meaning that rather than focusing on what a child can't do or isn't good at, we really focus on what they can do and what they love. And say you have a kid that loves trains or music or balls or anything like that, early intervention will utilize those strengths and utilize those likes and those loves, right? And we'll incorporate that into the process, into the sessions, into the services, into the sports, and all of that. I think one of my favorite parts about working in early intervention is that we are routines based. And that means that all of our recs, all of our recommendations, and all of our like supports and strategies get incorporated into the routines, the family's routines and the child's routines. And I think the idea really is to recognize and respect that parents and caregivers are busy. I get it. I am one, and I know just like how busy our days really can get. And it really is to not just kind of disrupt the family's routine or disrupt the child's routine, but really instead to strengthen it and build upon these routines. Early intervention works within a team-based model, and so I kind of already mentioned this on the last slide, where there are lots of different professionals, lots of different specialists, and we're all involved in this process of early intervention and supporting the families and the children. And most importantly, early intervention utilizes the best practice and evidence in order to promote the most optimal services and supports for children and their families. So let's dive into what occupational therapy is in early intervention. And before I can get into what OT looks like in early intervention, I feel like I want to just start by talking about what occupational therapy actually is, because I think a lot of times it can be kind of a misunderstood profession, or maybe people think that we do something different than we actually do. So, to define occupational therapy is a profession that seeks to promote mental and physical wellness in people across the lifespan. And this is through the use of therapeutic everyday activities. So, in today's world, I think a lot of people think that when we're talking about occupations, we're talking about maybe a job or something like that. But actually, an occupation can be defined as anything that occupies your time, anything that you do within your day that brings meaning and purpose to your life. And so sometimes in life, things can happen. There can be an accident, an injury, or a developmental delay that can interfere with these meaningful activities. And so occupational therapy practitioners are experts on occupations and studying how and why people engage in these daily activities. They then can utilize meaningful activities or occupations, as we like to call it, to improve the client's health and get them participating in things that are important to them. So, OT practitioners, they work to build skills, make adaptations, increase independence, and improve function for the clients. So then, as an occupational therapy practitioner in early intervention, what we do and what I do is that we address the daily occupations of children. So this can include eating, dressing, self-care, sleeping, anything that a child is really doing kind of within their daily routine. And the best part about this is that all of this is done through the modality of play, which of course is a child's most favorite and valuable occupation. So we, through play and through kind of using these meaningful occupations, we can address things like fine motor, gross motor, cognition, social emotional ability, adaptive behavior, as well as also sensory processing and sensory modulation. We use a holistic lens to look at the environment, to look at the family dynamics, the support systems, as well as the child's unique skills in order to provide the supports and strategies to best help the kids and, of course, like I've mentioned many times, the families. So now that you know a little bit more about early intervention and what kind of OT is in early intervention, I just wanted to briefly mention just kind of some of the importance of early intervention. So, first of all, let's talk some stats here. 80% of a child's brain is formed between pregnancy and age 3, which is crazy. Like, I mean, being that I have 2 young kids and a daughter that just turned 2, it is amazing to see how much growth and how much change, how much actually happens within their first couple years of life. And data also suggests that a young child's brain is twice as active as an adult's, and that they are most adaptable at this point. So, this makes change easier, it makes things happen faster. And so, needless to say, there's a lot of things that happen right now. It's such a pivotal time period within a person's life. And that's just one of the reasons that why having early intervention and kind of putting in supports and services for children and families at this time is just so crucial. The next part that I want to bring up is the importance of family and caregivers. And again, I know I've already kind of talked about this, but this is really the biggest part of early intervention. And as practitioners, we might see a kid once a month or once a week. If we're lucky, we might be able to see them twice a week. But the parents and caregivers are with the child 24/7. And so ultimately, any change, any progress is really due to the work that the families and the caregivers are doing with the children. And of course, just with guidance and support from us. And then outside of the benefit for the child and the families, early intervention services have also been found to achieve more and cost less than services that can be delivered at a later date. So, not only is early intervention good for the caregivers, but it's also good for society as a whole. And then, kind of just to wrap up, I'm looking at the time here, so I know I'm getting right up to that 15 minutes here. But just to wrap up, I really wanted to just kind of take a minute to share my perspective on the father's role in early intervention. Now, clearly, I'm not a dad, so this is just my perspective and what I've seen through my work and also through kind of my personal life too. So, personally, I've really seen um, how my husband's role and how him as a dad has just the relationship that he has developed with our children. And it's I don't even have words for it. Like it's just it's so special. And I have seen, now that I've been an occupational therapist, gosh, for almost 15 years now, I'll be honest with you. I've worked with a lot of moms, and I've really only worked with a handful of dads, but it is the dad's work that and the dad's involvement that is so pivotal. I it really has the dads that I've worked with are the ones that have like really made this lasting impression on me as a practitioner. And what I've noticed is that they, like, through the dad's participation and through their engagement, there is this different dynamic. And when that father is involved, there's this beautiful thing. And like, honestly, like, I don't know if I can even put words to it right now, but raising a child is hard. And raising children, if you have multiple kids, it is really hard. And dads have this ability to bring this special, unique energy and presence that can really change the trajectory of a child's life. And, throughout their early intervention journey, throughout the early intervention process, but really kind of their whole life, their life as a whole. And so I really just wanted to touch on that because I feel like I haven't had I haven't been able to work with that many dads because typically it is the moms that I am working with. But when I do get that chance to work with a dad in early intervention, yeah, I'm like speechless because of just the specialness and the bond and the energy and everything that happens there. So, yeah, I think with that, I will open it up to any questions. And you can feel free to put them in the chat. Um, or can I see? Okay. So, other than occupational therapy, what other therapies do I recommend? Are you saying kind of within early intervention or just in general? Any more information there? So, I think the big thing, okay, I think the big thing when we're talking about services is that it's really kind of the what services are necessary, what services are going to be the most beneficial. And again, I'll highlight here that because early intervention can look different depending on where you live, what services are actually provided can differ as well. And so it really depends on the strengths and the needs of the child and the family. And I like the biggest ones I know in my area in terms of services that are provided to children and families, really OT, physical therapy, and speech language pathology tend to be the biggest ones. But then there are services such as ABA or behavior therapy. There can be specialized services for like vision and hearing, like I kind of mentioned before. Social work is another big one. Mental health services, that's been a big one that I've seen kind of on the rise recently. Um, there depending on your local early intervention program, um, there could be classes that they offer. So the early intervention program that I work with, they call them together from the start classes, and they have different ones about managing your child's behaviors. They have like speech and language classes. I know they have some play-based classes. And so there's lots of different things. It's hard to say what I actually really recommend because it really depends on the child and the family and what they need. But just know that there are kind of ample opportunities, ample services out there to really help you and help your children and help your family throughout kind of this early intervention journey. Okay. Ooh, okay. So, what are some simple things that we can do at home to complement OT? Gosh, this is this is another kind of tough question because it really depends on the age of the child and what they can do and maybe what they're struggling to do. But one of the biggest things is just being present and being there. And specifically, when we're talking about early intervention, we are talking about kids that are young, right? Under 3, maybe under 5 years of age, and just getting on the floor with them, being eye level with them, engaging with whatever it is that they want to be engaging with. And I think a lot of times, even as a practitioner, I feel like I get stuck that I need to be doing and I need to be doing therapy and I need to be doing all these things. And I think the beauty about being a parent, right? And I can speak from that too. Being a parent, being a practitioner is just being there and being present with your child and seeing what they want to be doing. And I mean, sometimes just sitting there and, making a silly noise or smiling at them or anything like that, those can be very simple, sounds very simple, but those can be really beautiful moments of where the child's like, wow, my parent is here, my caregiver is here, and they're interested in what I'm interested in right now. I think another piece that I'll throw in here is also a lot of people, I feel like I was the same way when I first became a practitioner. I felt like I had to go get all the fancy toys and all the toys with like bells and whistles that light up and make sounds and do all these different things. And what I found over my years as a practitioner, and especially now as a parent, is sometimes it's just simple activities. And you can find something that, say, it's a recycled material or an empty yogurt container or a paper towel roll or something like that. And you can find these very simple activities and you can turn them into super fun games. Like things, something that comes to mind recently, that I had this big egg carton and my daughter wanted a snack and I was like, you know what, let's turn this into a game. And so I actually like grabbed goldfish and grabbed some yogis and like all different things and literally just put a couple of them in each of the little like egg compartments. I don't know what you call that. And as she's sitting there, she's smiling, she's laughing, and she's like picking up her snack. And she thought it was so fun. And it was something so simple and so easy that I just kind of threw together. So knowing that you don't have to go out and buy all these fancy toys and spend an arm and a leg on, therapy tools and all that kind of stuff. Like you really can just find things that you have around your house that can complement whatever, if you do have an OT that's coming in and working with your child, um, that can complement them. And also like complement, I should say complement the services. And also ask your OT and be like, what else can I be doing at home? Like I see you doing this, like how can I embed that into our daily life and our daily routine and all that kind of stuff. Okay, I know I missed one up here. Okay, so how do you find an early intervention that works for your child? So honestly, I would just go to Google and type in early intervention and your area. Like the more specific that you can get, your city and state or something like that, and it should link you to that early intervention program. If you can't find it on Google, definitely reach out to the pediatrician or maybe anybody else that's affiliated in the care, and they should be able to link you to that local early intervention program. Um, the really cool part about early intervention, I should have mentioned this earlier, is that you don't necessarily have to have a doctor's referral. You, as the parent and the caregiver, can actually reach directly out. And in most areas, now some areas might be different, but as far as what I've seen and what I've heard, in most areas, you can actually reach out yourself and refer your child and start that kind of early intervention process. So yeah, do some research and hopefully Google will point you in the right direction because there are so many different programs and they're not all like affiliated with each other. I know within California, there's like over 20 different, they call them regional centers, and that's where the early intervention program resides. And so, yeah, even within California, the different early intervention programs, or I should say, early intervention programs differ across that state. And that's the one that I'm most familiar with. So then across the US and across the world, it can be very, very different. Okay, hopefully that answered that question. Any recommendations raising both a boy and a girl siblings with early intervention? Yeah, it's like being that I have both a daughter and a son, I can see the differences. And I feel like even if you have multiple kids, but they're the same gender or something like that, kids are different. Each kid is unique. Each kid has different strengths, different needs, and different things that they like to do. I think for me, as a practitioner, one of the biggest things that I really like to do during my sessions, especially when there is a sibling, and now this could be a sibling that is also receiving services, or this could be a sibling that isn't receiving services through early intervention, but I love getting them involved within reason, right? Now, there are times that we really have to focus on the one child that we're coming in to see, but within life, I mean, within real life, siblings are always there unless they're at school or at a sports or something like that. Siblings are typically always around, and I love having the siblings get involved and assist or be a part of it. So sometimes when there are maybe older kids, I love to kind of have them become the teacher or the therapist or something like that. And I tell them what I want them to do or what I would like them to do. And then like I let them kind of lead the session or take over a portion of it or set up something. And it has been beautiful to watch because a lot of times I have the parents that come to me and they're like, "Oh my gosh, I can't manage all my kids right now." And I'm like, "Okay, let's do some setup. Let's set up the simple activity and let's get everybody involved so they feel like everybody is doing something." And then, the older kid is proud that they're helping. And then I actually see that there's like carryover. Once I leave, they kind of become the therapist and the practitioner. But if you have maybe both kids that are in early intervention, I think it's recognizing when they need their kind of individual time and their individual support, but then also maybe when you can bring them together. I'm sorry if you can hear one of my kids is crying right now. I'm hoping you can't hear that, but shout out to to my husband and their dad who is handling them right now. But I think I think it's just recognizing what each individual child needs, but then also how you can potentially work together and bring them together. And maybe that is having a therapist, or if you have maybe an OT and a PT and one's working with one child and one's working with another, how they can kind of interact and how they might be able to participate together. Again, it's going to be individually based and based on each individual child. So hard to kind of say globally what to do, but those are just kind of some things to think about. Okay, here's another question here. I'm just looking at the time. Um Ooh, thank you for this question, Michael. This is a great question. Okay, what would you recommend with respect to preparing to phase out of early intervention as you approach 3 years of age, or if you happen to be in an area that goes until 5? So this is, yeah, this is a great question, and I think a lot of times families can feel like maybe they kind of get left hanging or they're not fully prepared as they make this transition from early intervention into school-based services. So generally speaking, when a child turns 3, that's when they become eligible for school-based services. And there's a big difference between early intervention and then also services that happen within the school district. And so what I like to do when I have a child that is getting close to the age of aging out and transitioning is I really like to walk the families through what is going to happen? What can they expect? What are the differences between early intervention and school-based therapy and school-based services? Because a lot happens and it can be very overwhelming. I so before I started specializing specifically in early intervention, I actually worked for a couple different school districts. And so I have the lens of being a school-based occupational therapist and attending countless IEPs and meetings and all this kind of stuff. And I actually got to do a lot of the transition meetings for kids entering from early intervention. And I remember walking in as a practitioner and being overwhelmed. And this is before I was a parent, and I can only imagine how a parent would feel walking into that situation where it's a big meeting and there could be 10 to 15 people, all different specialists that are like, this is what we're going to do for your child, and this is what your child can't do, and this is what your child can do. And it can be a super overwhelming process. So first and foremost, if you have practitioners that you're working with right now, talk to them and see if they have any advice or any insight into this process too. But what I like to do is kind of sit down with my families and just highlight what this process is going to look like. So generally speaking, the the early intervention team is probably going to reach out to the local school district and say, hey, this kid's turning 3. They're going to be, oh man, okay, I have less than a minute here. But they are going to be transitioning here. And then there's probably going to be some assessments that happen, explain what the IEP, the individualized education plan is. And then my biggest thing is I say, once all this starts to kind of happen, when you have questions, come back to me and hopefully I can answer them, or I'll read through the IEP and make sure that it is that it makes sense. And that if they have questions, I'll help kind of spell it out for them. So if you have practitioners that you know and trust, ask them and see if they can help you through this process, because it can be overwhelming. Thank you, everybody, for listening. And thank you for this opportunity. It was great to be here.